Good morning. Greetings from Grace Ministries at Rafa. We're also known as Trinitarian Grace International. Thank y'all for being here again this week. We appreciate it. And before we get started with our speaker today, Doug Johannsen, our good friend from Minnesota, I'd like to remind us that our mantra is two of them, actually. All are included. And what's the other one, fellas? God is not mad at you. That's a good thing to always remember. God's not mad at us. He's not in the mad business. He's in the loving business. Our friend Jesse Chastain there from Rafa there, he's a staff member there now. He's going to sing a song for us here right before Doug. And just as soon as he finishes, Doug, you can just kind of take over from there if that's all right. Jesse, you ready? Come on with it.
There you go. All right,
We got to hear their remix. I don't want them to hear my remix.
No. You gotta set front.
I'm not gonna sit there. I might do this a certain way so they can be heard the right way. So, Romans 8:1 says there is no condemnation for those that are in Christ. You know, as people, we mess up, and the first thing the enemy tries to attack is our identity, who we are, right? Let's go like this. When Jesus went to the desert to be tempted, the first thing that Satan attacked was his identity. He said, surely, if you are the Son of God, turn these stones into bread. So he attacked his identity. There's no condemnation. So you know who you are, right? We're children of God. No matter what we do, that is our destiny. So I'm gonna share this song. Thank y'all for just being here, like all of us together, because we're all here trying to do the right thing and do something, get somewhere. Let me find the right one first. Sorry. Cooley kind of put me on the spot on this one, but it's all right. There I was on death row, guilty in first. Son of God hanging on the hill. Hell was my destiny. Crowd was shouting, crucify. Could have come from these lips. Dirty shame was killing me. It would take a miracle to wash me. Then I read letter, and the ground began to shake. Prison wall started falling, and I became a free man that day. Felt like lightning hit my veins. Dead heart began to beat. Breath of God filled my lungs, and the Holy Ghost awakened. Yeah, the Holy Ghost awakened me when I read the red letter. Oh, and the ground began to shake. Prison walls started falling, and I became a free man that day. I became a free man that day. Prison walls started falling. I became a free man that day. Thank you, God, for red letters. When the ground began to shake, grace of God started falling, and I became a free man that day. Yeah. Oh, nice.
Well, thank you very much, Jesse. I really appreciate you doing that music. I've learned over the years that there are going to be people who are reached, motivated, encouraged far, far more by music than they are going to be by a sermon. And of course, there's some people are more reached, motivated, and whatever by a sermon. So, but it takes all, and I really appreciate you doing that. It's a special treat to be able to have live music, I just so appreciate you doing that. So I want to say thanks. And I believe it does fit in quite well with the message today. So I'd like to begin. Let me give you just a little bit of a background here, kind of give you an idea of what we're going to be doing. First of all, when I started to write this, my intent was to cover the life of a man named Joseph in the Old Testament. That was what I had intended to do. But as I moved forward into it, I realized that I had to give a little bit more background. And so in order for us to understand why Joseph was the way he was, why he did what he did, it's necessary to know a little bit about his father and even his grandfather and his great-grandfather. Joseph was the son of Jacob, who was the son of Isaac, who was the son of Abraham. And these are all people that if you don't know them, you will get to know them because they are very, very important players in the development of Christianity. Judaism first and then Christianity. This message is going to be edited for length. Only have basically a half an hour or less. I'm going to be giving you bits and pieces from about 5 chapters of Genesis, so there's a lot left out. But I'm hoping that I can present it in a way that would encourage you to read the whole story for yourself. And what would really be ideal is you could get together in small groups and take turns reading bits and pieces to one another and then discuss it as you read. And I bet if you start doing that, it would take you several days to go through these chapters, but you would be incredibly encouraged. At least I think you would be incredibly encouraged. Now, I want to start with the birth of a man by the name of Jacob. Although my main character is eventually going to be Joseph, and I won't be able to get to that one until the next time I speak, which is going to be 2 weeks from now. Anyway, Joseph was born about 1915 BC, which is about 4,000 years ago. But as I have written on the slide, to understand Joseph, we need to know something about his parents and his siblings. And in Genesis 25 and verse 21, we find Isaac, who would be Jacob's father, praying to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was barren. Now, it's interesting that what you find here already is that Isaac had a relationship with the Lord because he prayed to him. Now, there's a lot of things that Isaac did not know about the Lord that we know today, but nevertheless, he did know to pray. And he believed that the answer, that the Lord did answer his prayer because his wife Rebekah became pregnant. And not only was she pregnant, but she was pregnant with twins. And so she then goes to the Lord in prayer and says, why is this happening to me? You know, what's going on? Because her babies were really quite active inside her womb. And any of you any of the ladies who have had children, you know how much they can kick. And if you've had twins, wow, they can kick each other a full lot. Things can get pretty pretty tough sometimes. Anyway, as those two boys grew up, and I'm leaving out a lot of details of their growing up period that are very important, but you can read that yourself later. We see a problem of favoritism cropping up. And these, I'm going to say these family traits or these family mistakes are still being made today. It's like we could almost tell this story in modern America or modern Nigeria or any other country in the world, because these same things are going on in some manner, shape, or form. But the two boys, Esau and Jacob, Esau was the skillful hunter, a man of the open country. He loved the outdoors, while Jacob was a quiet man staying among the tents. And there was also a difference in their physical appearance. Esau was really had a lot of body hair, whereas Jacob had, as they describe, a very smooth skin. Anyway, Isaac, who had a taste for wild game, loved Esau. So here's dad favoring Esau. But Rebekah, the mother, loved Jacob. And so it must have been pretty obvious because of the way the account is stated, loved Esau and loved Jacob. So that's not a good thing to have in a family, to have that kind of favoritism. Perhaps every one of us have either experienced that in our families or seen it happen in other families, and it generally does not turn out well. Once when Jacob was cooking some stew, Esau came in from the open country famished. So here we have a man cooking, which apparently was not that unusual. When Jacob was cooking some stew, Esau came in from the open country famished. And he said to Jacob, "Quick, let me have some of that red stew. I'm famished." And that's where he got the name Edom, because Edom means red in their language. And Jacob then, who was quite a wheeler dealer, and that's actually in his family heritage, when you look back, especially on his mother's side of the family, you find a lot of really, well, let's put it this way, if they were poker playing people, they would be marking the deck. That's the kind of folks that you find. Anyway, first sell me your birthright. And in that day and age, the birthright, or in a sense, the majority of the will would be given to the firstborn son of the family. And so that's why Jacob said, "First sell me your birthright," because Jacob was technically the secondborn, not the firstborn. Now, I know this is a rather long section, but I think it's important for us because you'll see so many things in here that actually are still kind of happening today. I'm jumping ahead now a few years because Esau, in that previous slide, let's just go back to that previous slide. Because Esau, and if you read the next few verses, Esau did indeed sell his birthright to Jacob. And at least that was a deal between the two brothers. And the scriptures say that he despised his birthright. He didn't think much of it. So anyway, so that was kind of a deal between the brothers, but dad wasn't in on that deal. The father, who was the one who had the right to distribute the birthright, wasn't in on the deal. But later on, the father of the two boys, Isaac, in Genesis 26 and verse 2, he says to his sons, "I am now an old man, and I don't know the day of my death. Now then, get your weapons, your quiver and bow, and go out to the open country to hunt some wild game for me. Prepare me the kind of food, tasty food I like, and bring it to me to eat, so that I may give you my blessing before I die." So he wasn't just giving a blessing of himself personally, but there was a very special blessing that God had given to Abraham that was intended not just for Abraham, but for Abraham's descendants. So Isaac was aware of that, and he was handing on kind of a family blessing that had started with Abraham. Now Rebekah, the boy's mother, was listening as Isaac spoke to his son Esau, eavesdropping, you see. When Esau left for open country to hunt game and bring it back, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, "Look, I overheard your father say to your brother Esau, 'Bring me some game and prepare me some tasty food to eat, so that I may give you my blessing in the presence of the Lord before I die.'" So she adds, "in the presence of the Lord before I die." She adds that to the statement. But at any rate, so here she is colluding with her son. So you have mom and mama's boy together. And you have dad and dad's boy on the other side of the aisle, so to speak. Division going on. And she's sneaking behind his back. But in all fairness, she kind of has to, because that was a very heavily patriarchal society, and women did not exactly have a lot of rights or a lot of say. So, you know, if she wanted anything, she had to be very crafty about it and devious in many ways about it. Anyway, so then in verse 8, she says, "Now, my son," she's saying this to Isaac, "listen carefully and do what I tell you." I got this all figured out. "Go to the flock and bring me 2 choice young goats, so I can prepare some tasty food for your father, just the way he likes it." She's like, "I'm not leaving this up to chance. You know, Jacob, I know you're a good cook, but I want this to be just right. And I know I can nail this." Verse 10, "Then take it to your father to eat, so that he may give you his blessing before he dies." And Jacob then says to his mother, it's kind of like, "Whoa, Mom, you've overlooked something. My brother Esau is a hairy man, and I'm a man with smooth skin. I mean, hey, the old man is about half blind, but for crying out loud, what if he touches me? He can tell the difference right away. You know, feel all that hair, and then I'd appear to be tricking him. You know, in other words, he'd discover the plot and would bring down a curse on myself rather than a blessing. You don't know what you're doing, Mom. You got to think this thing through." Well, as we see in the next slide, we have the identity theft, actually the old-fashioned way of doing identity theft coming to bear. And here's what he does, and they do together. So he went and got the 2 goats, brought them to his mother, and she prepared some tasty food just the way his father liked it. She also covered his hands, that is Jacob's hands, and the smooth part of his neck with goat skins. Then she handed her son Jacob the tasty food and bread she had made. Now, it must have been one hairy guy, but I also understand that the goats and the sheep back in that day were not quite as hairy as what they are today, because we've done some breeding with sheep and goats to make them a little hairier, I guess. Anyway, read that somewhere one time. Verse 18, he went to his father. Jacob now goes to his father, and he lies through his teeth. Man, he tells so many lies here. He says, "I am Esau, your firstborn." That's a lie. So we have a famous patriarch of the clan lying through his teeth because he wants the birthright. "Please," and he says to his dad, "Please sit up and eat some of my game, so you may give me your blessing." Some of my game. Yeah, a couple of domestic goats that Mom prepared. Isaac asked his son. You know, Isaac was by that time pretty much aware of the nature of his sons and the dysfunction in his family. He may have been old and he may have had poor vision, but he hadn't lost his mind yet. And so it's kind of like, okay, I don't trust my sons. I don't trust these guys. "How did you find it so quickly, my son?" Like, wow, that was a quick hunt. The Lord, and then again, a blatant lie from Isaac. "The Lord your God gave me success." The Lord your God, not the Lord my God, because Jacob had not yet accepted Isaac's God as being his God. So he recognized that, yeah, your God has some power here, and he's your God, and maybe the God of Abraham and Isaac, but I don't know about this guy yet. "But he gave me success," he replied. Again, which was a blatant lie. By the way, brings up another point, maybe you ought to consider it. I often hear people say, "Well, the Lord spoke to me and told me to do thus and such." Well, you better be prepared to question that sometimes, because not everybody that comes to you and says, "The Lord did this for me," or "The Lord did that for me," is telling the truth. Sometimes they're just telling you something to legitimize what they have done. So just be careful. Just because somebody says, "Well, the Lord spoke to me," or "The Lord did this," or "The Lord did that," don't necessarily believe them right off the bat, especially if they are not exactly people of good character. Anyway, then Isaac said to Jacob, "Come near." So here he's going to do the test. "Come near so that I can touch you, my son, to know whether you are really my son Esau or not." And you can probably just see the sweat dripping off of Jacob's face by that time. I'm going to get caught. Jacob went close to his father Isaac, who touched him and said, "The voice is the voice of Jacob. Now I can tell the difference between the voices of my son, and you sure sound like Jacob. but the hands are like the hands of Esau. I'll tell you what, that's a tribute to Rebecca, that Rebecca could do that kind of a, well, I don't know exactly how to say it, sewing or makeup artist or whatever, that she could do that so well that make Jacob's hands, the hair on his hands, feel just like that of Esau. Now, he didn't recognize him, for his hands were hairy like those of his brother Esau, so he blessed him. He got tricked, he got conned, identity theft. And of course, today, there's a lot of identity theft going on, especially against the elderly. Yeah, we'll take advantage of the elderly because maybe they're not going to catch this. Anyway, so Jacob then brought it to him, and he ate, and he brought some wine, and he drank. Then his father Isaac said to him, "Come here, my son, and kiss me." And so he went to him and kissed him. When Isaac caught the smell of his clothes, he blessed him, because Jacob was wearing some of Esau's clothes. They had figured that out too. He smelled like the great outdoors. Anyway, so you see, this is very, very clever. And that's the kind of house that Jacob was raised in. Likewise, that's the kind of house that you'll see later on in the story that Joseph was raised in. And our behavior often has its roots way, way back, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 generations. Now, as a result of this, Esau plans to kill his brother. And that's not a new story. A lot of times a brother will kill a brother. That was the first murder, where Cain slew Abel. Sometimes animosity between brothers is terribly great. In fact, I have done funerals of men where a brother in the family absolutely refused to come to the funeral because of something that happened when they were teenagers or kids. The animosity and the hatred was so deep that even at the funeral they wouldn't come. Anyway, so he said to himself, Esau, who's now very angry and holding this grudge, "The days of mourning for my father are near. Then I'll kill my brother Jacob. I'm going to kill him when the time is right." Well, when Rebekah was told that her older son Esau had said what he had said, she sent for her younger son Jacob and said to him, "Your brother Esau's consoling himself, thought of killing you. That's the only way he can feel good, is just, I'm going to keep working this murder around in my head until I do it. Now then, my son, do what I say. Flee at once to my brother Laban in Haran." Okay, at this point, how many things have these guys done that could have gotten them arrested today? Plenty, and there's plenty more to come. So now, in Genesis 28 and verse 2, not only did his mother tell him to flee, but his father is saying the same thing. "Go at once to Paddan Aram, to the house of your mother's father Bethuel. Take a wife for yourself there from among the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother." And part of this was part of his insistence on him going there was because his son Esau had married a couple of local girls, and those local girls were really a pain in the neck and a disgust to Isaac and Rebekah. They couldn't stand those two girls. And so it's like, yeah, we don't want any of these, this particular clan of people marrying into our clan. You got to get out of here, son, and go to somebody else, because we just don't like Esau's wives. They're terrible girls. Anyway, so does that ever happen today in families where a son marries a girl and the parents don't like him or don't like her, or maybe the parents of the daughter don't like their son-in-law? Of course that happens. So this is nothing new. And again, I want us to understand that God is there with them all. He knows what's going on. He's watching this. He's giving them the freedom to make some really poor choices. But as verse 3 says, may God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and increase your numbers until you become a community of people. Now, at this point, I want us to understand there is a big difference between a contract and a covenant. What he is speaking here is not a contract. What he's speaking here is the terms of a covenant that God had made to Abraham. In other words, what a covenant is, it does not depend on what you do. A covenant depends on the person that made the covenant. Like God said to Abraham, "I'm going to do this for you." And so God is doing this for Abraham, irrespective of Abraham's conduct or successes or failures. It's not a contract. And this is what's going on. May God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and increase your numbers until you become a community of peoples. Verse 4, may he give you and your descendants the blessing given to Abraham. And that was that covenant as well, so that you may take possession of the land where you now live as an alien, the land God gave to Abraham. Then Isaac sent Jacob on his way, and he went to Laban, the son of Bethuel, the brother of Rebekah. So he goes to his uncle's place. He goes to his uncle's place, and when you read about Laban and the struggles that Jacob had with Laban, you kind of find out where Rebekah got some of her devious, crooked ways, because Laban, his uncle, was a pretty sharp cookie. And so, in a sense, Jacob met his match. Jacob the swindler, Jacob the heel grabber, met Laban, who was every bit as devious as what he was. It was kind of a mess. Anyway, when Jacob got there, and the first thing he did was he saw one of Laban's daughter, Rachel, who had brought some of her flocks, or her father's flocks of sheep, I believe, to be watered. And he saw her, and man, it was love at first sight. So he goes to Laban, identifies himself. I'm your sister's son. And there was a big, oh, great, glad to have relatives here, love you, and you're welcome, and on and on and on. I mean, it was really great. And then he said he wanted to marry Rachel, but made the deal with his father-in-law, or future father-in-law, that in order to marry her, you're going to have to work 7 years for me, and that'll be your wages. You work for me for 7 years, and you can marry my daughter, taking advantage of his future son-in-law. Well, at the end of 7 years, his crooked uncle switches girls. It just boggles my mind in this one. I mean, you think that if you had been looking at Rachel and listening to Rachel and been around Rachel for 7 years, waiting for the day that you could marry her, how can you be fooled? Anyway, so there they are that night in the tent, and instead of Rachel being in the tent, he sneaks in her sister Leah. His father does that. Her father, Laban, puts the older sister Leah. Now, as it was described earlier, Rachel was a knockout, but Leah, it simply says about her, she had weak eyes. So there was apparently a difference even in their appearance. That it's just like, Jacob, couldn't you figure this out? And remember, he had just conned his father with that goat hair trick and that food trick, and now he gets tricked himself. And so when he wakes up in the morning, it's like, uh-oh, he's been sleeping with Leah. So, oh, what am I going to do? And he's angry, and he goes to his father-in-law and says, this isn't right, you're a crook. And his father-in-law comes up with some, oh, well, it's not our custom in our country to have the younger sister marry before the older one, so that's why I did that. It's kind of, I don't know whether that was really the custom or not, but that was what he said. And so Jacob says, okay, well, what do I got to do? What do I got to do then to have Rachel? And his father-in-law says, well, you just be with Leah for a week, and then you can have Rachel, but you got to work another 7 years. Okay, I'll do that. So it's amazing what a man will do for love, or is it sex? I don't know. Anyway, the soap opera gets worse is what I've entitled this slide. Very quickly, Leah bears 4 sons. Their names are Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. And by the way, some of you are really familiar with the Old Testament. Some of you are not. Levi would be the patriarch, or the ancestor of the Levitical priesthood in Judaism. And Judah would be the patriarch of King David, and also one of the ancestors of Jesus himself, just so you know. Anyway, so that honor comes through the wife of Jacob, and the wife that he didn't love. Meanwhile, Rachel was unable to have children, and that was a big, it caused great shame and an embarrassment if you were a married woman and couldn't bear children. I mean, that was just something, in that society, it was really a bad thing. So what happened then is she winds up giving Jacob her servant girl. Well, this is a surrogate mother. I can't have children, but if you have this, my servant girl be the surrogate, then those sons can be counted as your sons or my sons. Well, she had two sons in no time at all, and named them Dan and Naphtali. Then Leah gets back into the act, so to speak, and she gives Jacob her servant girl. Well, my sister did this, I can do that. And so she gives Jacob her servant girl, and this servant girl winds up giving birth to two more sons, Gad and Asher. You get the idea. This is kind of one messed up household. There are now, Jacob now has two legitimate wives and two surrogate wives. And the two legitimate wives are sisters. What a mess that had to have been in the household. Anyway, here they're making a drug deal. I tried to figure out exactly what mandrakes were because Reuben, the oldest boy in the family, finds some of these mandrakes in the field and he gives them to his mother Leah. Now, some accounts say they were hallucinogenic or some believe they enhance fertility, whatever. I mean, there's some apparent drug connection with those mandrakes because at least that's the best that we can figure today. After all, this was like 4,000 years ago. So Rachel, the woman who does not yet have children of her own, out of her own body, she wants the mandrakes. And in order to get them, she has to agree with to let Leah, her sister, the one who already has four sons, and she was no longer apparently able to bear or hadn't been able to, well, probably hadn't been able to have a relationship with Jacob for a while. So she has to agree to let Leah sleep with Jacob. So Leah then actually very boldly goes up to Jacob and says, look, I agreed here there's an agreement that we made. You got to sleep with me tonight because I've given these mandrakes to Rachel. So I made this drug deal. You got to fulfill it. So he does. Anyway, Leah takes full advantage of the deal and has a son, named him Issachar, and very quickly had another son named Zebulun, and then a daughter, Dinah. Now, Dinah is the only daughter that's mentioned. I suspect they had maybe more daughters than that, but Dinah is the only one that really plays any part in the history. That history will come up later, and so that's where she gets mentioned. Now, after all that, in verse 22 of Genesis 30, then God remembered Rachel. He listened to her and opened her womb. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son. And she says, and again, you can see she had some awareness of God, some connection with God. And she says, God has taken away my disgrace, because her disgrace was simply being a married woman and not having been able to bear children. She named him Joseph and said, may the Lord add to me another son. So now you get the idea. You see where Joseph ranks in the family structure. He is the son of the favorite wife, the firstborn son of the favorite wife. And at this point, he is the youngest in the family. And that can create an awful lot of tension in the family. You got a bunch of older siblings, and then you got this last born comes along, or he wasn't actually the last born. He was at that time when he was born, but he's the favorite son, okay? And so that creates some tension, which we will see unfold in a later message. I just wanted to add later on, Rachel had another son. His name was Benjamin, but sadly she died shortly after he was born. So she's asking, may the Lord add to me another son? And the Lord apparently answered that prayer, but maybe she should have asked the Lord, I don't know, is it good for me to have another son? I don't know, but she got what she asked for and she died. Now, they also get away with murder. Here's where Dinah comes into play. Dinah's now, a young girl, about probably, a woman. And in the place where they lived, there was a local ruler that kind of took a shine to her and wound up taking her honor, so to speak, raping her, if you want to put it that bluntly. And that created a bit of a problem in the family, but he wanted to marry her. He really wanted to marry her because he was quite smitten with Dinah. And so they had a family meeting. He had a family meeting, and the brothers, of course, they were enraged that he would treat their sister that way, which, by the way, was kind of two-faced because there's some things that Judah did that were every bit as bad, but that's for another time. And so these guys worked out a deal. I mean, you could just see how crafty they were. Well, okay, they said to this ruler, this king, I guess, or king's son or whatever, you want to marry her, you and all the men in your tribes got to be circumcised. But these guys were like in their 20s and 30s and 40s and on, and it's like, you got to be kidding me. But the king was so, the ruler was so smitten with Dinah that, okay, that's what we'll do. We'll let you circumcise all of us, and because we think Dinah's worth it. So 3 days after being circumcised, and at a point in life where they were quite sore, not able to move around a whole lot, two brothers, Simeon and Levi. And remember, Levi was the one who later became the patriarch of the priesthood of the Israelite nation. They killed every male in that tribe. Every male in that tribe or in that village. And what the other brothers do? They looted the village. So they were all in on it. Again, these are capital offenses. These are things that would put you in the big house for a long time. What was Jacob's response? Oh, we have to move away because you kind of made our family to be a little bit stinky and obnoxious around here. So I guess we better move. What a deal. Okay, wrap up here. I know that these look like really bad people. And this is a very unvarnished story about the way these guys were and the struggles of life. Now, to be fair to them, they lived in a culture that was extremely dangerous. Extremely dangerous. They didn't have some of the safeguards that we have today, not even close. But let's look at the New Testament in Hebrews 11 and verse 20. Here's what these folks did have. By faith, the writer of Hebrews says, Isaac blessed Jacob. What does he mean that? Well, Isaac was certain that God was going to keep the covenant and the agreement, or not the agreement, but the covenant that he made with Abraham. He was certain. He believed that that was going to happen. So he passed that on to his son Jacob and also to Esau. And then Isaac, when he was dying, he passed on the same thing. Blessed each of Joseph's sons. I guess that should be by faith Jacob when he was dying, not Isaac. When he was dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons. Oh, I'm sorry, that is correct. Isaac, when he was dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons. By faith, Joseph, when his end was near, spoke about the Exodus, because these guys all believed that what God had told Abraham was going to come to pass. They believed in it. And they didn't get all worried about, oh, we're going to lose our inheritance, we're going to lose our birthright because we did this, that, and the other. They lived a very hard life, and they made some changes in their life. And so we'll see some of that happen too in the next message. So in Ephesians 2 and verse 8, this is true. It says, for it is by grace you have been saved. And that was true for Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, the whole clan. For it is by grace you have been saved. You know, to Rebecca as well, and Rachel and Leah and the two servant girls. For it is grace you have been saved through faith, and this not from yourselves. It is the gift of God. That's how powerful these things are. Now, why am I telling you all of this? I mean, it sounds like quite a soap opera. So why am I bothering to tell you all this? Well, I'm sure that some of us are afflicted with this I am not stuff. Like, I'm not good enough. I'm not nice enough. I'm never going to be good enough. But you know, the truth is God has always worked with flawed people. Always worked with flawed people. Always, always, always. People just like us, and in some cases, far worse than we are, if you just look at the behavior. Now that you have sort of an idea of the story, I'd like to ask you to read it for yourself, especially Genesis 25:19 all the way to Genesis 35. I think you will find many more thrilling details that I didn't cover. I remember asking one of my professors this one time. I noticed there was an episode of Gunsmoke that just seemed to echo some of the interaction that Jacob had with his sons. It's just like, wow, this is so close to that. And my professor apparently knew some of the writers of the Gunsmoke series and said, yeah, they actually used some of the Old Testament stories as inspirations for the Western called Gunsmoke. And you can see echoes of those stories in other movies and TV episodes as well. Next time, which I believe will be October 24th for me, we'll use all of this that I've covered to better understand the life of Joseph. And it is my hope and my prayer that this has been and will continue to be extremely encouraging for us all. Okay, Randy.
Thank you, Doug. I really enjoyed that, and I'm looking forward to the follow-up part 2 and part 3, every what we have to do. But thank you so much. It was really good.